everyone. Good to be back with you. I think I have been sick more times this winter than the last several years. But glad to be with you, with Mike being gone this week, being able to speak with you this week. We're going to be in Proverbs chapter 9, if you want to turn there. That is our passage today. We're continuing to talk about discovery and our journey with wisdom as we walk through the book of Proverbs. So chapter 9 is where we'll be today. But as with most any biblical passage, even with poetry, sometimes, we need some context. So why we're here? Why are we in chapter 9? What has Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, talked about up until this point that will make Proverbs 9 make more sense? And in order to learn that, we actually have to go back to chapter 7. And so if you need to turn your page, because chapters 7, 8, and 9 are very much the same narrative. To be able to understand chapter 9, we have to go back to 7. And 7 was one of Mike's first passages, if you remember. Solomon's looking through his window, looking through the lattice, and he sees his son, this young man, lacking sense. This was, I think, if not our first one of the first two passages that we looked at. His son is falling prey to temptation, and Solomon is begging his son to turn aside from this forbidden woman that he's chasing after because he's straying off of his path. Proverbs 7, then, if we look at it in this such a way, it's a personification of, to use more of a poetic words, it's a personification of folly or foolishness, temptation. Solomon is taking this concept, and in order to explain it better, he's creating this story, and it's personifying, giving flesh to temptation. That's chapter 7. We walked through that. Don't need to come back to that. Proverbs 8, then, if we turn the page, is a personification of wisdom. We've personified folly, and now we are personifying the entire of chapter 8 that is a bit longer. We are personifying wisdom. And I want to read some of that for you. Let's read the first 11 verses, starting in verse 1. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries aloud. To you, O men, I call, and my cry is to the children of man. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. We've personified wisdom, which is quite a contrast from the previous chapter. And in chapter 7, it's Solomon who's begging his son to learn wisdom and to follow the right path. Now wisdom has taken the stage. Learn prudence, she says. Listen to me, learn sense. Everything that I say to you is righteousness. Learn from me, walk with me. This is why I'm personifying myself, so that you can literally see yourself walking with me. Leave the woman of Proverbs 7. It only leads to death. Why should we walk with wisdom? She tells us, if you skip down to verse 32. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise. Do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. I read the wrong passage there. That was supposed to be 22. We'll get there. Let's come up to verse 22. I read 32. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work. This is verse 22, chapter 8. The Lord possessed me, or another word for that is fathered or created. He's talking about wisdom. The first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the wind. When he established the heavens, I, wisdom, was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limits so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him, like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man. I skipped forward too far. Before the creation of the world, it was wisdom that God used to do so. At the beginning of God's work, wisdom is there. As a master workman, delighting in all that God created. Where there is creation, there is wisdom. Then she finishes with verse 32. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction, be wise, do not neglect it. Listen to me, watch daily at my gates, wait beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life. Whoever finds me finds life. This is the contrast between the two chapters. The woman of chapter 7 is loud, she is wayward, wily of heart. Her house is the way of Sheol, coming down to the chambers of death. I wanted to, but I didn't think through it enough. I wanted to have two different people sitting here. And I actually had those two people. Rachel was actually very, very excited to be the loud and wayward woman that just yelled and was this personification, but the chapters do well enough to show you the difference in the two women, one being folly, one being wisdom. And both are calling out in these two chapters, because we get to chapter 9. Solomon has walked, he's given us a very strong picture of both things. Both are calling out to us. The message is very different because one brings death and the other brings life, which brings us to chapter 9. And this is where we take these two women and we bring them both together in the same place and we see what happens. So let's read chapter 9. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts, mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places of the town, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread, drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you, but reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. I've got a couple, thank you. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years will be added to your life. If you are wise for yourself. But if you scoff, you alone will bear it. Now for folly. The woman folly is loud. She's seductive but knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. Proverbs 9 is a classic example of two different poetic devices. And we want to talk about two of those things. The first of which is chiasm, or some people pronounce it chiasm. It's spelled C-H-I-A-S-M. The second of which is parallelism. And to best understand what we're looking at here, we kind of have to see why that's important. Let me give an example, because chiasm is taking two series of statements, and you're going to juxtapose them in reverse order. Let me give you an example. Jesus said this one. No one can serve two masters. He will either hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. We've got A, B, C, C, B, A. We're saying the same exact thing. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. Same statement. You either hate the one and despise the other. Same statement. You will love the other or be devoted to the one. We're taking the same statement, rewording it a little bit to be able to give it more meaning, to depth. He's not saying the same thing twice, but he's wording it in such a way that we best understand. One, it makes it more memorable. This is a verse that you can keep in your head pretty well. A second, it also tells you that this is probably a pretty important thing for you to know. Because, how many times has Paul said, I say it again? Anytime he wants you to know something, he says it again. And Jesus did the same thing. Now, he wasn't like, hey guys, this is a chiasm. But this is how it was written so that we remember it. It does. The second parallel, the second device, now that we understand chiasm, the second thing is parallelism, which is similar, but it's taking two statements and you're contrasting them next to each other. So they're saying different things, but in the same way. And this is all through Scripture. If you just jump down to, let's just go to Proverbs 10, the first verse. A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother. This statement, but this statement. That's the entirety of chapter 10. If you read through it, the Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked. A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Psalms, Proverbs, all over the place. You see this parallelism. This, but this. That's important. Because Proverbs 9 is a beautiful picture of both of these things. And if we read it seeing that, we'll better understand what Solomon's trying to accomplish. Not only does it give us a picture of wisdom, but why we should chase after it and who it is. So first, let's talk about parallels. We've got two different women. We're going to parallel contrast the two of them. Whereas in chapter 10, it's every verse, in chapter 9, there were three different sections. I don't know if you noticed that. The very beginning section, the first 6 verses, was all about wisdom. There was a center section, and then the last section, those 6 verses, was all about folly. We've got 3 sets of 6 verses, and we're going to compare these two things. What's interesting is that the comparison is more than just that there's 2 separate paths, and that we should follow one and not the other. What is interesting is what each of them say as we pass by them. So let's go back through that again. Verse 1 and 2, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. she has also set her table. There's preparation made here. A house has been built. Pillars have been set. And if you know the significance of numbers in Jewish knowledge, what does 7 mean? It's completion. There's solidarity here. I've hewn these 7 pillars. There's completion here. And a table is set. Also important. So if you jump over to verse 13, where we're talking about folly, we're taking these 6 verses, we're comparing them to these 6 verses. The woman folly is loud. She's seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. No preparation. She's just loud, seductive, doesn't know anything, and is just sitting at the front of her house. There's not even a table there. Sitting on the threshold. Verse 3, coming back to wisdom. She, wisdom, has sent out her young woman to call from the highest places in the town. Wisdom has servants, people who follow her. Wisdom is respected, and her servants call from prominent places. Contrast that to verse 14, the second half of 14. She takes a seat in the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. Folly is now in the highest places of the town, in the same place that wisdom was. But notice her posture again. She's seated. She's not standing there calling to people. There's some sloth here. She's come to the same place. She recognizes that this is where people are. And I want to dissuade you from this thing, but I'm just going to sit here. In the same way that she sat at the door. Here's the message from wisdom. Verse 4. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. This is the message of wisdom. Leave your simple ways, and the emphasis is and live. What does folly say? Starting at verse 16. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, and her guests are in the depths of Sheol. Her initial message are the exact same words. He who is simple, let him turn in here. The audience is the same, but then the message is very different because she cannot offer what wisdom can. One woman calls to offer life, the other death. This really should be a simple choice. But sometimes, if we take it beyond this example and we apply it to our lives, we know that it's not as simple of a choice as life or death. Stolen water versus bread and wine. Why is folly so attractive sometimes? We know it leads to nothing good in the long run. It only has temporary fulfillment, if that. It's like a jar of cookies. And I don't even mean like good cookies. I mean like store-bought cheap cookies. Sugar high, then crash, immediate regret. But we still eat them. Why? Most of the time it's because they're there. Why did we eat that? The package was there. I had to. It's not that you necessarily sought them out. You didn't wake up in the morning and say, ooh, I'm going to eat a whole bunch of Oreos today and ruin my lunch and my diet and end up feeling awful. That wasn't my initial intent. But it's too easy to make that decision because most of the time, the decision has much more deeper consequence than eating a bunch of Oreos. We see this a lot more with small children. Why did you hit your sister? I don't know. Real reason is probably the sister was standing there. There was no reason. Because she's there. So I did it. We don't know why we do things. autopilot, we're not thinking, becomes foolishness 9 times out of 10. When we're not pursuing right choice, the wrong choice is always right there. And why did I choose this one? Because it was there. I didn't seek it out. I don't have to seek it out because folly's in the same place that wisdom was. They both went to the highest places of the town. They both said the same thing initially. But obviously, folly can't offer the same thing that wisdom does. But if we're not seeking wisdom, it's a really easy choice. Because I get to sit down. It's an easy choice. So we found the 2 parallels. 2 different women, each have a story to tell, a message to give, something to offer. But what about chiasm? We need to come back to that second. We skipped a section in the middle. We've got the first section, that first 6 verses of wisdom, the second section of folly. There's 6 verses in the middle. And if you know anything about poetry and Jewish narrative, if you want to find what the whole thing's about, you got to come to the middle. And that's what chiasm's all about. You're taking one concept and you're walking just like we did with that first. Go ahead and throw that back up there, Tucker. That Matthew 6:24. The purpose of the whole thing loving God, being devoted to God. That's the purpose of the whole thing. Yes, I want to tell you these other things, that you can't serve 2 masters, and that in order to do so, you have to hate the one or despise despise the other master. But my main point is love God, be devoted to God. Same thing here. So 7 through 12, let's find that center point. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and he who reproves a wicked man and cures injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. This is the center. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. For by me your days will be multiplied, and your years will be added to your life. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. Let's look at what this looks like, bringing it into chiasm like this. The first and the last, we're comparing the wise to scoffers. We're talking about receiving and teaching wisdom. In the very beginning, 3 and 4, those statements, was verse 10. Because the purpose of this proverb is to express to its hearers the importance of verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. Because yes, it's important to talk about wisdom. Yes, it's important to talk about folly and the things that they say and the things that they do. But when it comes down to it, the why is beginning with the fear of the Lord and knowledge of the Holy One. And we have to understand the difference between, in order to understand wisdom, we have to understand the difference between wisdom and knowledge. You've heard the saying, knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. It's clever, but I want to take it a little further, because not putting a tomato in a fruit salad isn't wisdom. That's just common sense. Wisdom is judging what knowledge is true, right, and lasting. It's taking a knowledge that we have and deciding, judging, discerning what of this information is true, right, and lasting. We want to know what is actually factual, but not only factual, but if it's worthwhile, if it's the whole truth, because that's important, and if it has present and future implications. We have to do this with the news all the time. Knowledge is listening to and reading the information given, because obviously we have to start there. But then we have to be discerning enough to see what is a lie and what is the truth. Because knowing something false isn't wisdom, it's ignorance. But you can't stop there, because unfortunately, you can't just get information and say, okay, no, that's a lie. Okay, this is truth. I follow this truth. Because it's more complicated than that. We end up with false interpretations of things and have misunderstandings among people, not necessarily because what we've been told or what we believed is a lie. Sometimes what we have is true, but it may not be the whole truth. Some things are just left out sometimes, which can change the entirety of the situation. If somebody tells you something, it may be true, but if I've left this important piece out, you'll not understand, or you'll have false understanding of what actually happened. Insight, then, I believe, is another step deeper than that. Because wisdom gives you the ability to make right decisions. You have the knowledge, you've determined its truth, and you act. Insight, though, is what carries that knowledge and wisdom. It's what that knowledge and wisdom is based upon. And according to Proverbs 9, that's the Holy One. That's where insight is. Because if you don't know the Holy One, it doesn't matter how wise you are. There have been thousands of wise people who have lived. Many that we've all heard of have wise sayings, and there's good truth to a lot of it. But what is it based upon? The Holy One? Probably not. It's not enough to have wisdom. Solomon had all the wisdom you could possibly ask for. And he still fell victim to sin, if you read the book of Kings. What he lacked was insight. What he lacked was knowledge of the Holy One. What he lacked was perseverance. He strayed from going straight on the way. Because folly wasn't calling to people who were just out wandering and didn't have a path. She went to the same place that wisdom did. If you look back at verse 15, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. It's not just random people that she's talking to. It's people that are following the right path. She's still calling to them. And at first saying the exact same thing as wisdom. This is what's alarming about this passage. That even if you are on the straight path, you have to continue to seek wisdom and insight. Because folly is loud and seductive. And has pulled more people off the right path than you or I could possibly count. You know people like that. In order to know the Holy One, you have to be willing to hear him speak. You have to have discerning ears and a heart willing to seek out and accept truth. Wisdom closed her chapter with, "O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise. Do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death." This is a daily task. And it's not that we're earning salvation by these things that we do. It's that if we don't actively seek out the Holy One and his wisdom, we'll fall for whatever else is in our path. Whatever is right there, if we're not actively seeking it out, that jar of cookies is just right there every time. And it won't satisfy, it never does. So I guess the question is, what are you hungry for? And I don't mean lunch. I mean on this journey, because you dare not walk this path without something to eat. You don't go on a hike for any amount of time without something to eat, or you will regret it. Two women call from high places. Wisdom offers bread and wine that she's prepared to mix herself and put it on a table. Folly offers bread and stolen water, won't even give you a table to enjoy it on. But if we aren't seeking it out, we're not seeking out instruction, if we're not listening, if we're not daily watching at wisdom's gates, we won't find life, and we'll eat whatever's right in front of us. I wanted to close with going back to our chiasm as a practical application in the style of Matthew 6. No one can serve two masters. He'll either hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. I took that chiasm, that framework, and I put Proverbs 9 into it. And it reads like this. Maybe. You cannot journey two paths, for you either ignore the one and travel the other, or you'll maintain the course of one and pay no attention to the other. You cannot walk with both wisdom and folly. Same statement, stated twice. You can't follow both of these. It doesn't work. So have ears to hear, the wisdom and discernment to see the truth from the lies. May you have insight to persevere, and may the Holy One be your guide. Let's pray. God, we are forever grateful for your wisdom because we know that it comes only from you. Because without you, our wisdom is not wisdom. These wise sayings of people from this earth, they fall flat sometimes because they are not rooted in the insight and knowledge of the Holy One, because they don't have the fear of the Lord. Without the fear of the Lord, there is no wisdom. Without knowledge of the Holy One, there is no insight. And so if we want to understand your word, we want to see what it is that you have to say, we must have these things. We must fear God. And sometimes we dumb that down a little bit. We call it respect. We call it reverence. But when we read the Old Testament, there is a genuine fear of God because we know that you are life and that you can take it away. That you are God and there is none other. Teach us to fear you, because when we come to you in fear, then you tell us not to fear not. It's this reverence, it's this, we come to you face down, seeing your holiness. And it's there that you pick us up and you say, my child, I am here, fear not. Help us to find that place where we have a deep knowledge of you, where we can see you and we have the insight to find life.